They put a 72-year-old grandmother behind bars because my grass wasn't green enough for their precious neighborhood standards. But before I tell you this whole incredible story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Dorothy Williams, and for 38 years, this little house on Maple Street has been my sanctuary. After my husband Harold passed 5 years ago, it became my whole world. I raised 3 children in this house. Tommy, who's now a teacher in Denver, Sarah, my nurse daughter in Phoenix, and little Michael, my baby, who became a Marine and served 2 tours overseas before settling in North Carolina with his beautiful family. Harold and I planted every rose bush, every tomato vine with these hands. We installed that white picket fence board by board one summer when the kids were small. The neighbors used to stop by just to admire Harold's prize-winning lawn, thick emerald Kentucky bluegrass that he babied like it was made of gold. "Dot," he'd say, "a man's lawn is a reflection of his character." Every Saturday morning you'd find him out there at dawn, checking the sprinkler system, testing the soil pH, carefully edging around my flower beds with that old manual trimmer he refused to replace. When Harold had his first heart attack 3 years before he passed, I took over lawn duty. Let me tell you, maintaining that grass was harder than raising 3 teenagers. But I did it. For him. For us. For the pride we took in our little corner of the world. But when you're living on Social Security and a small pension, while on $147 a month to be exact, and the drought hits harder than it has in decades, well, priorities shift real fast. The water bills started climbing in June. First $89, then $134, then a shocking $247 in July, when I was still trying to keep everything green. That's nearly 20% of my entire monthly income. Just for water, I remember sitting at my kitchen table, Harold's old reading glasses on my nose, calculator in hand, trying to make the numbers work. Mortgage payment, utilities, groceries, medications for my blood pressure and arthritis, car insurance, property taxes. There wasn't room for a $200 water bill. I can keep my flowers alive, I told myself, rationing every drop. But this grass, it's just grass. Harold would understand. He'd have to. The lawn started turning brown in patches by August, first around the edges where the sprinklers didn't reach as well, then spreading inward like some kind of disease. I tried spot watering the worst areas with a garden hose, but it was like trying to fill a swimming pool with a teacup. Mrs. Henderson next door, bless her heart, offered to help with the water bill. "Dorothy, honey, Jim and I have more than we need. Let us help." But pride's a funny thing. Harold and I had never taken charity in 43 years of marriage, and I wasn't about to start. "I'll manage, Betty. It's just temporary. Once the drought breaks." The first letter came on a Tuesday in August. Bright white envelope, official-looking HOA letterhead. Homeowners Association, lawn maintenance violation. First notice. $25 fine. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. $25 to make my grass green during the worst drought in 30 years. I crumpled it up and threw it away. That was my first mistake. The letters kept coming like clockwork. Every 2 weeks, another violation notice. $50, $100, $250. Each one with more threatening language than the last. Second notice. Immediate action required. Final notice. Legal action pending. Violation escalation. Covenant enforcement procedures initiated. I started keeping them in Harold's old cigar box, The one where he used to store his fishing licenses and lottery tickets. By September, I had 12 notices totaling over $800 in fines. That's when Janet Morrison started calling. Janet had moved into the neighborhood about 10 years ago, right after her divorce settlement gave her the money to buy the biggest house on the street. One of those new construction McMansions that looks like it belongs in a magazine. Not on Little Maple Street with our modest 1970s ranch homes. She'd gotten herself elected HOA president within 2 years, running on a platform of preserving property values and maintaining community standards. What she really meant was making everyone else's homes look as perfect as hers. "Mrs. Williams," she said in that clipped professional tone that made my skin crawl. "Your property is bringing down neighborhood values. We've had complaints." Complaints? From who? The Hendersons next door had been bringing me soup when I had pneumonia last winter. The young couple across the street, the Johnsons, always waved when they walked their golden retriever past my peonies, which were still beautiful despite everything. "I'm doing the best I can, Janet," I told her. "Maybe when the drought breaks, when I can afford. The covenant is clear, Dorothy. Green, well-maintained lawns. No exceptions. The homeowners in Willowbrook Estates expect a certain standard. Willowbrook Estates. That's what they'd started calling our little neighborhood after the developers built those 5 big houses on the hill. As if slapping a fancy name on our street could erase 40 years of history, of community, of neighbors who actually knew each other's names. Janet, I've lived here longer than you've lived in this state. I know what kind of neighborhood this is supposed to be. Times change. Dorothy, standards evolve. Either you maintain your property according to the covenants, or we'll be forced to take legal action." I hung up on her. Another mistake. The harassment escalated after that. Janet started driving by my house twice a day, taking pictures with her phone. She'd park across the street and just stare at my lawn, making notes on a clipboard. One morning I caught her measuring the brown patches with a tape measure. "What exactly are you doing, Janet?" She straightened up, not even embarrassed. "Documenting covenant violations for legal proceedings. This brown section here is approximately 40% of your front lawn. The covenant clearly states, 'Get off my property.' Actually, Dorothy, the front lawn extends to the curb, which makes it community property under the HOA agreement. I have every right to be here. Community property. My lawn. The lawn Harold and I had planted, watered, and loved for 38 years. By October, the fines totaled $1,147, more than my monthly income. The letters turned uglier, filled with legal jargon I didn't understand. Breach of covenant. Willful noncompliance. Assessment of liens. I called my grandson Tommy in Denver, the one who'd gone to college, thinking maybe he could help me understand what was happening. "Grandma, this is insane," he said after I read him the latest letter. "They can't fine you into bankruptcy over grass. There has to be something we can do." "I don't know, honey. Maybe I should just sell the house, move somewhere smaller." "No way. Don't you dare let them run you out of your own home. Let me make some calls, see if I can find you a lawyer who..." But lawyers cost money I didn't have, and Janet Morrison knew it. The final notice came on a Thursday in November, hand-delivered by Janet herself with a smug smile that made my blood pressure spike. "Dorothy, this is your absolute final opportunity to resolve this matter without legal intervention. Pay the outstanding fines of $2,140 by December 1st, or we'll be forced to pursue all available remedies under the covenant." "Including what?" "Janet, including foreclosure proceedings and judicial enforcement." "Foreclosure. Over brown grass." I'd heard of people losing their homes to medical bills, to job loss, to financial disaster. But grass? Then came the knock at my door on December 4. 3.2 men in cheap suits, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The younger one, barely older than my grandson, shifted nervously while his partner, a heavy-set man with kind eyes, cleared his throat. "Dorothy Williams? You're being served with a summons to appear in municipal court for violation of homeowner, association covenants, and failure to pay assessed fines." My hands shook as I signed for the papers. "Court? For brown grass? Ma'am?" The older officer said quietly. "I've got a grandmother your age. This doesn't sit right with me. You might want to call the legal aid, see if they can help." But legal aid had a 6-month waiting list, and my court date was in 2 weeks. Judge Peterson was younger than my grandson Tommy, fresh out of law school, probably, with perfectly styled hair and a courthouse tan that screamed ambition. He looked at me like I was a nuisance he needed to process quickly before his lunch break. "Mrs. Williams, you stand accused of willful violation of homeowner association covenants and failure to pay assessed fines totaling $2,563, including court costs. How do you plead?" I tried to explain. About Harold's death, about the drought, about living on a fixed income that hadn't increased while everything else. Water, electricity, groceries, medications kept getting more expensive. Your Honor, I'm not refusing to maintain my property out of spite. I simply cannot afford to water my lawn during the worst drought we've had in decades, while keeping up with my other necessary expenses. He barely looked up from his papers. "Mrs. Williams, ignorance of the law is not an excuse. The HOA has the right to enforce its covenants. You signed these agreements when you purchased your home. Do you have the money to pay these fines?" "No, Your Honor, I don't." "Then I'm holding you in contempt of this court's authority. 30 days in county jail, suspended pending payment of all outstanding fines, plus an additional $500 in contempt. Fees, you have 48 hours to comply. 48 hours to find $3,060 or go to jail. Over grass, I spent those 48 hours calling everyone I could think of. My children scattered across the country scraped together $800 between them. Mrs. Henderson and her husband Jim pooled their Christmas money for another $400. The young Johnson couple across the street, sweet as they were, could only manage $75. It wasn't enough, not even close. On December 20th, 5 days before Christmas, Sheriff's Deputy Mike Rodriguez came to my door. I'd known Mike since he was 8 years old, riding his bike past my house on his way to school. His mother Maria had been part of my Wednesday morning coffee group for 15 years. "Mrs. Williams," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm so sorry. I have to do this." He couldn't look me in the eye as he read me my rights, as he gently placed the handcuffs on my wrists, as he helped me into the back of his patrol car while neighbors I'd known for decades stood in their driveways, watching in shock. Mrs. Henderson was crying. The Johnsons' teenage daughter was recording it on her phone. And Janet Morrison? Janet Morrison was standing in her perfectly manicured front yard, with her arms crossed, watching my humiliation with satisfaction. The county jail booking process was designed to strip away every shred of dignity. They took my wedding ring, the one Harold had saved for 6 months to buy when we got engaged. They took my reading glasses, my blood pressure medication, even the small gold cross necklace that had been my mother's. "Standard procedure," the booking officer explained apologetically. "We'll keep everything safe for you." The orange jumpsuit was 3 sizes too big. The canvas shoes had no laces. I looked in the small metal mirror and saw a stranger, a criminal, where my reflection used to be. My cellmate was a girl named Crystal, 19 years old, with purple hair and more tattoos than I had grandchildren. She was in for shoplifting baby formula. "What are you in for, Grandma?" she asked, not unkindly. "Brown grass," I whispered. She stared at me. "You're kidding." I wish I was. That's the most fucked up thing I've ever heard, and I've heard some shit in here. Crystal became my guardian angel. She showed me how to make the thin jail mattress more comfortable, how to avoid the scary women in the common area, how to stretch the terrible food to keep from going hungry. "My grandma's about your age," she told me one night. "She raised me when my mom was too strung out to care. If anyone did this to her, I'd burn their house down." I spent my first night in jail crying, not for myself, for Harold, for the shame of it, for what the neighbors would think, for the fact that a woman my age, who'd never had so much as a parking ticket, was sleeping on a cot next to women young enough to be my granddaughters. The second night, I got angry. The third night, I started planning. When they released me after 3 days, 3 days that felt like 3 years, I found my front yard filled with flowers. Dozens of bouquets from neighbors I didn't even know. Cards and letters from people as far away as Oregon and Florida. Mrs. Henderson rushed over before I'd even gotten my key in the lock. Dorothy, honey, the stories everywhere. Channel 7, Channel 12, even CNN picked it up. Grandmother jailed over brown grass is trending on all the social medias. That's when I met Sarah Martinez from Channel 7 News. She was young, ambitious, and absolutely furious about what had happened to me. "Mrs. Williams," she said, setting up her camera in my living room, "I've been covering injustice for 8 years, and this is the most outrageous abuse of power I've ever seen. We're going to make sure everyone knows what they did to you." But the real game changer was Marcus Thompson. You remember Marcus, the young black man who lived across the street with his wife Jennifer, the one who always waved when he walked. Their dog Rex passed my peonies. Turns out Marcus wasn't just a friendly neighbor. He was a civil rights attorney with the ACLU, specializing in housing discrimination and abuse of power cases. He'd been watching my situation unfold with growing outrage. "Dorothy," he said, settling into Harold's old recliner with a legal pad and a fire in his eyes. "What they did to you isn't just wrong. It's illegal on multiple levels. HOAs cannot have people jailed for civil violations. That judge overstepped his authority. And the selective enforcement? That's discrimination based on economic status. That's when Marcus laid out the real story. While I was being harassed and fined into bankruptcy over brown grass, Janet Morrison had installed a completely artificial lawn the previous spring, in direct violation of the same covenants that were being used to destroy my life. You're kidding. I have photographs, time-stamped, dated photographs. She spent $15,000 on fake grass while you were being fined for having real grass that was the wrong color. It gets worse. Marcus had been quietly investigating the HOA's enforcement patterns for months, ever since they'd started targeting elderly residents. Mrs. Chen down the street, she'd been fined $500 for having unapproved flowers in her front bed. The same pink roses that had been there for 20 years. When she couldn't pay, they'd put a lien on her house. Old Mr. Kowalski had been cited for having a lawn decoration, a small ceramic gnome his late wife had loved, that violated the aesthetic standards clause. He'd been too embarrassed to fight it and paid $300 to make it go away. They're systematically targeting the elderly, the poor, anyone they think won't fight back, Marcus explained. It's economic persecution disguised as community standards. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, squeezed my hand. We started a GoFundMe while you were away. Raised $8,000 in 3 days. We're not letting them destroy you over this. But more importantly, Marcus continued, we're going after them. False imprisonment, civil rights violations, intentional infliction of emotional distress, selective enforcement. The whole board is liable, and I'm going to make sure they pay for what they did. For the first time in months, I felt something other than fear and shame and exhaustion. I felt hope, and underneath that hope I felt something I hadn't felt since Harold died. Felt powerful. What do we need to do? Marcus smiled. First, we're going to get you some media training, because by the time I'm done with this case, you're going to be the face of HOA reform across the country. The legal battle took 8 months to come to trial. 8 months during which Marcus systematically dismantled every argument the HOA's expensive lawyers tried to make. Discovery was a gold mine. Internal emails between board members revealed the true motivation behind their enforcement campaign. Janet Morrison had written to another board member, "We need to clean out the dead. Wait in this neighborhood. These elderly homeowners are bringing down our property values. If we make compliance expensive enough, they'll be forced to sell." Another email, this one from board treasurer, Rick Patterson. "Dorothy Williams is the perfect test case. She's old, alone, and poor. If we can break her, it sends a message to the others. They had literally conspired to force elderly residents out of their homes through financial harassment." Marcus also uncovered the selective enforcement pattern. While I was being bankrupted over brown grass, board president Janet Morrison had installed artificial turf, covenant violation. Added a hot tub without architectural approval, covenant violation. Painted her house a non-approved color, covenant violation. Built a shed that exceeded size restrictions, covenant violation. Total fines assessed against Janet Morrison. Board member Rick Patterson had been running an unlicensed home business, selling insurance from his garage, for 3 years. Clear violation of the residential use-only covenant. Fines assessed. Board secretary Linda Walsh had 6 cats, despite the covenant's 2-pet limit. She'd also been parking her RV in her driveway year-round, blocking sidewalk access. Fines assessed. 0. The double standard was so blatant, so systematic, that Marcus barely had to argue. The evidence spoke for itself. But the real bombshell came when Marcus deposed Judge Peterson, the young judge who'd sent me to jail. Turns out Judge Peterson's law school mentor. Janet Morrison's divorce attorney, the same lawyer who'd helped Janet buy her house in Willowbrook Estates, the same lawyer who was now representing the HOA in this case. Your Honor, Marcus said during the deposition. Did you know about this connection when you sentenced Mrs. Williams to jail? Well, it didn't seem relevant at the time. You didn't think a professional relationship between your mentor and the plaintiff's attorney was relevant to your judicial decision? Judge Peterson's face went white. I want to clarify that my decision was based solely on the law as I understood it. The law as your mentor's business partner explained it. To you, the courtroom was packed for the trial. Word had spread through social media. Justice for Dorothy was trending nationally. Neighbors I'd never met sat behind me. Elderly people from across the state came to show support. The story had captured something people recognized. The abuse of petty power, the targeting of the vulnerable, the corruption of institutions meant to serve the community. TV news crews lined the courthouse steps, signs reading, "Jail the real criminals," and "HOA abuse stops here," filled the plaza. Janet Morrison and the HOA board sat at the defendant's table, their expensive lawyer whispering frantically in their ears. Janet looked smaller somehow, deflated. The confident woman who terrorized me with tape measures and clipboards was gone, replaced by someone who couldn't meet my eyes. Marcus was brilliant. He methodically laid out the case, showing how they'd systematically targeted elderly residents, selectively enforced rules, and conspired to force people from their homes. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Marcus said during his opening statement, "this case isn't really about brown grass. It's about power. It's about what happens when people with a little bit of authority decide that compassion is weakness, that poverty is a crime, and that elderly Americans are disposable." The prosecution called witness after witness, Mrs. Chen, crying as she described the lien placed on her home over her roses. Mr. Kowalski shaking with anger as he talked about the gnome his late wife had cherished. Neighbor after neighbor describing the reign of terror the HOA board had unleashed on anyone who didn't fit their vision of the perfect community. Crystal, my former cellmate, testified about our time in jail together. "This woman was the kindest person I met in county. She helped me write letters to my daughter, taught me how to budget money when I got out, and she was there because she couldn't afford to water her grass. It's the most messed up thing I've ever seen, and I've seen some stuff." When it was my turn to testify, the courtroom was absolutely silent. "Janet," I said, looking directly at her, "I thought we were neighbors. I thought we were supposed to look out for each other. Instead, you used your power to punish me for being poor, for being alone, for struggling with things beyond my control. I pulled out Harold's old reading glasses, the ones they'd taken when they booked me into jail. My husband died wearing these glasses. He was reading in his favorite chair when his heart finally gave out. These glasses saw 43 years of marriage, 3 children raised, a lifetime of love and partnership and community. They took them away from me when they put me in that cell, like I was some kind of criminal." The jury was riveted. Some were crying. "You didn't just want my grass to be green, Janet. You wanted to make an example of me. You wanted to show everyone in this neighborhood what happens when you don't have enough money to meet your standards. Well, now I'm making an example of you." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Verdict: $850 in compensatory and punitive damages. The entire HOA board was ordered to resign immediately. Janet Morrison faced criminal charges for conspiracy and filing false police reports. But the real victory came 3 months later, when the state legislature passed the Dorothy Williams Act, limiting HOA enforcement powers and requiring mediation before any legal action against homeowners over property violations. Today my lawn is green again, not because I was forced to make it so, but because the settlement money allowed me to install an efficient drip irrigation system that uses 60% less water than traditional sprinklers. More importantly, it allowed me to set up a legal defense fund for other homeowners facing HOA abuse. The fund has helped 43 families so far. Single mothers facing foreclosure over playground equipment, their children left in the yard. Elderly veterans cited for parking their cars incorrectly in their own driveways. Immigrant families targeted with discriminatory enforcement of rules that other residents routinely ignore. Harold would be proud, I think. Not of the money. He never cared much about money. But of the fight. Of refusing to be invisible. To be dismissed. To be trampled on by people who mistake authority for righteousness. Janet Morrison moved away 6 months after the trial. Her house sold for $75,000 less than asking price. Turns out nobody wanted to live in a neighborhood known for jailing grandmothers over lawn care. The other board members quietly resigned and faded into obscurity. Judge Peterson was reprimanded by the state judicial board, and required to complete ethics training. He's been more careful about his rulings ever since, I'm told. Marcus Thompson. Marcus became something of a celebrity in civil rights circles. He's argued 3 cases before the state Supreme Court and has been featured in Legal Times as one of the rising stars in housing discrimination law. He still lives across the street, still walks his dog Rex past my peonies, still waves every morning. But now when he waves, it's with the satisfaction of someone who helped change the world a little bit. Mrs. Henderson and I still have coffee every Wednesday morning, just like we did before this whole nightmare began. We laugh about how she threatened to call the FBI when they arrested me. I was ready to chain myself to your front door, she tells people. Nobody messes with my Dorothy. Crystal, my former cellmate, got her life together. She's working as a certified nursing assistant now, saving money to go back to school for her RN degree. She stops by every few months to check on me, always bringing pictures of her little girl. You taught me that dignity doesn't have an expiration date, Grandma Dorothy, she says. The young couple across the street, the Johnsons, had their first baby last spring. A beautiful little girl they named Dorothy. I cried when they told me. Happy tears this time. My children are proud of their old mom. Tommy calls every Sunday to check on me and get updates on the fund, as he calls it. Sarah flies in from Phoenix twice a year now, instead of once, and Michael, my Marine son, tells everyone about his mother who took on the system and won. But here's what I learned during those dark months, when it felt like the whole world was against me. We're never as powerless as we think. We have neighbors who care. You just have to look for them. We have laws that protect us when we know how to use them. We have voices, and when we use them together, they become impossible to ignore. To anyone facing similar injustice, from HOAs, from institutions, from anyone who thinks your circumstances make you easy prey, remember this: your dignity is not negotiable. Your worth is not determined by the color of your grass or the size of your bank account or your age or your income or anything else they try to use against you. Stand up, speak out, fight back. You're not alone. The bullies are counting on your silence. They're counting on your shame. They're counting on you to just accept whatever they dish out because you're old or poor or alone or different. Don't give them that satisfaction. Some battles are worth fighting, even when, especially when, everybody tells you to just let it go. Harold always said, Dot, a person's character isn't measured by how they treat those who can help them, but by how they treat those who can't fight back. Well, I fought back, and I won. If this story moved you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible true stories of ordinary people fighting back against injustice. Share your own HOA horror stories in the comments below. Let's make sure no one else goes through what I did. Together we can hold these bullies accountable.